All right, Kevin back with you for another episode of the $1 Million Relationships Podcast. And today I am here with Nick Louise. Nick, welcome. So awesome to have you on the show today. I am looking
It's
forward.
an honor to be here.
This
Yeah,
is
it is
really
an
cool
honor to
because
be here.
you and I have known, well, I don't know if you've known about me. I've known about you for a long time because I got connected with Dan Kennedy through Joe Polish all the way back in like 1997, 98. And in fact, I attended my very first Dan Kennedy seminar in 1999. And which later became GKIC, which later you became involved in, and that's how I had first heard about you. And then more recently, our mutual friend Eric DeWay reconnected us because he was like, Kev, you should really look at interviewing Nick for the podcast. And I'm like, thinking to myself, I know of Nick. I'd love to interview Nick for the podcast. And so you and I made time to connect. We had a conversation already, and now here we are to do this interview. And so I'm really looking forward to this.
Well, of course I knew you, right? Of course I knew you. You had to be, what, about 13 years old, 14-year-old then
Yeah, right.
when you first found Dan. You had to be just a young, strapping young man from the West Coast, carrying on and running a great business. I want to, you always were a gentleman, always were a gentleman. Every time I met you at a Dan Kennedy event, a GKIC event, even a Joe Polish event or a Genius Network event, you always were just a gentleman and went out of your way to say hi and introduce me. And I think I just think about what you're doing now, and that just is just a genuine extension of who you are, right? And I want to thank you, really focusing on $1 million relationships, focusing on the power of entrepreneurships and building relationships. And you're realizing that our relationship bank accounts are equally as important as our monetary bank accounts, right? And making that happen for entrepreneurs. And the other day, as we are friends on Facebook, I saw you post. I came across all these old sales letters, right? So you had like a Yannick Silver sales letter. You had a Bill Glazer, Dan Kennedy, and it was like gold. I'm like, I didn't want to be like stalking and say, hey, can you send me a copy? But you talk about something that was gold, and you're a direct response guy like I am, and just like information and info products. And you and I were sharing, the first info product that you created, and how much care you put into it. And I think a lot of that is missing, I think, today in today's info product information world of people that really want to have huge impact, huge value on the world. And you're one of the standard bearers of that. So I would thank you for that.
Wow. Well, thank you, Nick. Man, that made me feel good. I really appreciate that. And I'm just going to take all that in. And you're right.
Well, you deserve it.
I had a friend of mine ask me we were talking about Dan Sullivan and unique ability. And Dan
Sure.
Sullivan is he's the guy that taught me about unique ability and taught me how to really figure out what my own unique ability was. And I had got some stuff from him over 20 years ago. And he said, hey, what you want to do is you want to send this wording out to people in your world and ask them what they see as your unique ability. And so I did that. Well, and we were talking about that with a friend of mine. And I said, I first started studying this years ago. I don't remember exactly when it was, but I did what Dan told me, and I sent it out to a bunch of people in my world at that time. And I saved all the responses in this Word doc. And I was like, it's on my computer somewhere. I just got to find it. And so I was hunting that thing down. And like Joe Polish was one of the guys that I emailed that to, and he sent me feedback of here's what I believe is your unique ability, Kev. And there was a bunch of other entrepreneurs, and it was really cool. But when I was hunting that document down, It was over 20 years old. That blew me away because, I'm like, wow, that was a long time ago. And then
Sure.
I found all those other files too. And it was
So you
cool.
think I think that's a great, I don't think we do enough of that. Do you think we do enough asking people, hey, what do you think my unique ability is, right? Because we all think we have that. But really to do that process, you really, you got to put yourself out there, right? So you got to be
Yeah.
comfortable with being vulnerable. You got to get comfortable with getting uncomfortable feedback back. And, it's kind of funny. I was just listening to one of Dan Sullivan's audiobooks on the way to the lake house this weekend and back, right? So I was able to finish that. But I think about Dan Sullivan. I ran into him in the early 90s, right? Because I was broke into the business as a financial services salesperson, selling stocks, bonds, insurance, you name it, 401ks to individuals and companies. And I kind of found my way to Dan Sullivan because he was big in that business. I think that's where his first coaching empire was built
Yeah.
out of
Yeah.
the traditional salespeople of financial services and that. And I actually have, I'm going to date myself just like you did, but cassettes of the unique ability, right? And the unique ability 1.0 and the DOS system, not that they're CD driven, but they're actually audio cassette driven that I came across. And I'm like, I don't even know how to play these, right? So I got to go like find a digitizer to create that. But yeah, I mean, I think we think we know ourselves, but many times when you do that experiment that you did or that exercise that you did, it's humbling, right? When
Oh, it is
people,
totally.
and I've done it a couple times, right? And I'm always like you were blown away. You're like Joe Polish even took, people take the time to give feedback when you actually ask for it,
Yeah.
right? Just like people take the time to help others when you actually ask for it. And many times we don't do enough of that. But we
Absolutely.
are connected as humans, and we want to help others. We want to help others survive and grow and be stronger. And I think, the chain is only as weak as the weakest link, right? And so we just want to keep on propping other people up. And in this crazy world that we're in entrepreneurship, right? You can never be propped up enough. And I think there's too much tearing other people down. And let's just focus on lifting everybody up and having a
Absolutely.
mentality that 1 + 1 + 1 really is 16, right? It's not three.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, why don't we start by, having you share, and we'll set a little bit of context so people get an idea of who you are and what you're about. So share, talk about, what you do, who you serve, and what inspires you most about the work you guys are doing and the impact you're making, Nick.
Well, thanks for that, Kevin. So the first thing is you mentioned, GKC. You and I met, and it's had a couple different names since it was just the G and the K, right? Or just the Dan Kennedy inner circle, then Glazer Kennedy. For those
Yep.
that don't know, Bill Glazer, phenomenal entrepreneur, Dan Kennedy, phenomenal entrepreneur and thought leaders, right? And really were champions of small businesses,
Yeah.
this lifting up the small businesses and helping traditional Main Street businesses, traditional B2B businesses, but also information marketers. And we've used those phraseologies. So I want to kind of ground those phraseologies so people know. And are the likes of Joe Polish, who really has catapulted that and went on and built out the Genius Network and has done phenomenal things for entrepreneurs and small businesses and does equally as much great work on the addiction side, right? And if you've ever struggled with that or have had a family member struggle with that, the work he's doing there is phenomenal. And you are a phenomenal info marketer on your own, right? And you've created that empire. So, long story short, when I was at GKIC and then Magnetic Marketing and No BS Inner Circle, whatever phraseology and name we had at the time, because we had so many different owners after Dan and Bill divested themselves of it and just were actively involved from an education and content production. I built out with the help of some other folks some IP, we'll say, right? And it's really IP helping small business owners, whether it's professional practices, B2B sales, whatever, however sells something to somebody, building out their sales process. Because a lot of business owners are the number one salesperson person for their organizations. But what they have to do is get beyond that if they really want to grow and scale. And quite frankly, the biggest kind of chapter that I'm on is helping them is figuring out their exit strategy and maximizing their value. Because for many of them, this is the number one asset, right? This is going to be what's going to fund their foundations, their retirement, their next phase in life by selling their businesses. And if they have a really honed in sales process, they're going to 1x, 2x, or 3x their exit versus just maybe getting a one times multiple of their earnings, right? So I'm trying to work with a lot of small businesses to help them focus on that. And so we built the process internally, how to hire, right? How to hire salespeople, because a lot of business owners struggle with that. They can't
Okay.
hire salespeople. They hired the wrong salesperson, how to manage them, how to build out the sales playbook, if you will. I'm calling it a sales process, whatever you want to do it. How do things get sold in this organization? Much, once the lead comes in, if it's an outbound shop, right? How does that outbound look like? And then what's your follow-up systems and processes? And many people, I'm a big theory of constraint guy. I'm a big systems guy, right? And so I think of that in my sales process. And then we kind of help them package it, and they could take it and implement it, or they can invite us in or have us stay. And then we work with them on a fractional basis to be a fractional sales leader for them and their team. We do some sales coaching. We listen to the calls. We work with their salespeople, because many times I say the business owner really needs to be the thought leader, the strategic thinker. We were just talking about Dan Sullivan, really upping their game, and they shouldn't spend their time thinking about the day-to-day operations of the sales team, right? It's the lifeblood. They can't take their eye off of it, and that's why we create dashboards and all that good stuff so the business owner knows what's going on. But we really focus on the professionalization and the management of the sales team to maximize your revenue. And also goes back to what we're saying, if when you're looking to exit, if you say, well, here's my playbook, right? Here's my sales playbook. Here's how we hire people. Here's how we follow up with people. Here's all the KPIs and the systems and everything that you need. The new owner who doesn't want to be in the grind of day-to-day selling a new business that they just purchased, they just want to grow scale, that they realize, oh, this is a really good shop because they've got all this stuff.
Yeah.
Much like people have marketing systems, right? You came from the marketing side. You're a phenomenal marketer, phenomenal copywriter. You do a lot of that work, did a lot of that work. And really, it's kind of taking the stuff that we knew on that side of it, making it follow-up systems and putting it on the sales side. So
Yeah.
that's what we do on a daily basis. I was blessed I work with a lot of people from GKC. I was blessed to have them either seek me out or I've run into them. And that was a lot of my client base when I first left. And it continues to be a good portion of our client base. And we work with information marketers or content producers, whatever we call them nowadays, course creators, coaches, all that. And then we work with a lot of traditional businesses.
Okay. Very good. Very good. So
How's
now,
that for a long answer to a short question?
no, that was brilliant. And Nick, this is the exact kind of thing. I don't want the short answer. I want the long answer because what I have learned after I think we've released like a little over 230 episodes of this podcast now, and I've got really intentional about doing these interviews now because I have figured out that for me, I get to be this guy who facilitates relationships that impact millions of people's lives. And when you're doing that with the right people, the natural organic byproduct of that is that millions of dollars in revenue get created. And what I have also come to realize is that this podcast has become such an invaluable tool in the work that I do. And so you sharing all that you just did, it really gives people some perspectives. It gives them some insight into not only what you do, but that you've been doing this for a long dang time. And you're pretty much an expert at this stuff. And it just kind of, so, I really appreciate you just speaking openly and candidly about that because, it's really easy for me to do my thing when I'm working with people who are just world-class experts at what they do. And so I appreciate that. And
Very kind, very kind.
so now that we've got a little bit of context,
I look at,
yeah,
I,
go ahead.
well, no, I mean, I look at the body of work and the people that you've interviewed, and all the different walks of life. It's it's really humbling, right? If to be on this, but just to see all the different people that you have, right? And you got people that educated at MIT, right, or to the guy that just kind of built them up on their bootstraps. If I think about all the different folks that kind of hit your orbit and became part of this wonderful podcast and this wonderful community that you're building of everybody helping each other and building on $1 million relationships. And so I think it's really phenomenal. And I've had the benefit lately of working with a lot of younger people just entering the workplace, right? And they really they don't have relationships, right? So they you have to teach them how to build the relationships. And there's a gentleman, I might be dating myself, but you know of him because you're from the Joe Polish Genius Network, Harvey McKay, right? And Harvey McKay did a lot of writing about the power of relationships, right? So he's always about the Rolodex, right? And now I'm really dating myself with the terminology of Rolodex, right? The old big cards that we had where we put
Yep.
everybody's information on it. Now it's a CRM or it's on our iPhones or wherever we're going to put it. It's in the cloud. But the most important thing about that, right? The most important thing is just learning from people, and every person you met, just gathering them. And I just think of the body of people that you knew. It just would be fun to almost like look through your mental Rolodex, right? And just say, who are all these people and what's the 6 degrees of separation? Because I think, if I wanted to get to the White House, who's ever White House it is, I just would call you and say, okay, who do you know? And you would probably try to figure out 4 people that could get me into the Oval Office. So this what you're doing, I think, is not only a great impact to our world, but we don't think about that enough, right? And we don't do a lot of building relationships and gathering information about people and saying later on in life, how do I use that? And you were telling me a story when we were sitting down about the gentleman with the comic book, right? And then how you connected him to somebody at Comic-Con. Right. And it's just, these little, we almost bits and bytes that go into your brain of how you just are always collecting that and connecting with people. And I think there's a master class in that, if you will, for people to learn that. And as I work with younger people or younger salespeople as they're growing into their career, I say that's the most important thing, right? Jobs will come and go. People will come and go. Money will be made and lost, right? It's just the nature of capitalism. But the entrepreneur, the building of the network and the constantly paying it back and making deposits into that network is so critical. So
Yeah.
thank you for that.
Well, thank you. And I think I've believed for a long time now that as entrepreneurs, relationships are our most valuable asset. Everything else stems from that. And I when we just focus on treating people the way that we would want to be treated, it's pretty doggone simple, really. And we've just become known for doing that and known for just showing up that way to be of service, to be of help, to all of that kind of stuff. It is. I mean, you show up that way for a while, and people just kind of know you. I saw my friend Ron Lynch posted this morning. My reputation is not what I say about myself. And I'm like, and that was the whole post right there. And I'm like, that's right. Reputation is what others say about us. That is our reputation, And when we have others just saying good things about us because we show up the way that we do, man, we're in a position to affect some really powerful situations and stuff. And so what I want to do now is I'm going to switch gears just a little bit. Actually, we're not really switching gears because we're going to dig deeper into this topic of relationships. And so I'm going to reiterate the question for the benefit of our listeners. So, Nick, have you ever been introduced to a person or persons who completely changed the course of your life or your business, so much so that much of what you have today would not be possible if not for this person or persons. And Nick, I'm just really excited to hear your story and your experience around this topic of relationships.
Yeah. Well, yes, obviously, of course, and just so many. But let's think of the highlights, right? Because your audience would get bored if I tried to name everybody, and it wouldn't do justice to that. So, if I think about the career, right, and the profession of sales, which has fed my family and clothed my family and put my kids to college and paid the mortgage along with, the work that my wife does and that. I think of myself sometimes when you ask what your personal identity is, it's probably salesperson first. And so there was a gentleman by the name of Arthur Kent, who was the first person to hire me as a salesperson. And was just, he's passed away. His son, I still kind of run into professional networks, and his son is there, and so he's a phenomenal guy, and really taught me how to approach this this career as a salesperson, and what it meant, right? What it meant to look and address and to treat clients and to look at the profession and just build your career on that. And so that was phenomenal. And I will be forever beholden into Arthur Kent, and all that he made the impact on the world. I had a gentleman that I worked with alongside with Art Kent. His name is John Skirsch. Passed away far too young, but he made such a huge impact on me and believed in me. And maybe at times when you were down as a young sales buck, and lifted you up and breathed life into you. And he was, always, just a completely jovial man. And then another gentleman in that realm by the name of William O'Donnell. Always, I mean, this guy was, $1 million producer back in the day when $1 million was $1 million, but always took his time out to educate me and to answer my questions and that. So in that realm, as an entry level, those people really made a difference on my world. If we fast forward to today, I'd be remiss if I didn't say that, Dan Kennedy in many ways made an impact on my life, right? Educated me in the power of direct response. I first saw him dating ourselves again in 1994 at a success event, right? We went to go see Zig Ziglar. Dan was there, kind of passing out flyers, and learned about the power of direct response or magnetic marketing at that point, and got to work alongside him. I used it to launch a couple different businesses, used it to launch a couple different careers, but then in early 2012, got to work with him or alongside of him. He was always a gentleman. He was always, a certainly a taskmaster, which is fine. But really learned a lot from him. And then if I could expound that, so many other entrepreneurs that I've been blessed to walk into, of people that just celebrate entrepreneurship, celebrate this crazy world that we're in of direct response marketers or information marketers, or just learning about it, or what we called Planet Dan at the time. They've all walked into my life. A good friend, like we talked about, Eric Douye. I mean, I was just teaching a sales team the other day, something that Eric shared with me, which is the language of love, of like your prospects' love language, right? And he taught me that while he was at GKC with me. I interviewed him about that, and he now to this day pay that forward. We're in 2024, and I'm teaching people that, right? So it's all these little people that have kind of orbited my life and came in. Another gentleman on a personal note, I think in many ways so helped my family and so helped my son in many ways. Paul Manassian may mean something to somebody, may not be something to other people, but he really was a great friend to this day, still a phenomenal friend. But at a time where I needed help, he was one of the first ones in line. And so I will never forget any of those people, right? And any of those relationships have all mattered. And there'll be four more tomorrow, right? And that's
Yeah.
the fun thing about life, right? We're going to get up and we're going to go do something, and we're going to meet four new people. And the key is just to treat people nice along the way. Give help if you can, when you can, lift others up, and just keep moving.
Yeah.
I'm a little verklempt thinking about all these people that are in my life that made an impact. So thank you for allowing me to go through memory lane,
Yeah.
and think of those folks.
It's I'm with you because there's been so many people in my own life too. And people at different stages, and people at, when I've made transitions in my life or in my business and stuff, that at key points were just so valuable for me and stuff. And so if you look back, so you mentioned Arthur, you mentioned William, you mentioned Dan, you mentioned Eric, you mentioned Paul, and I'm sure there could be many more. But if we're looking at these five, for example, um, I want you to think about of an experience where you personally you got to make a really big impact, where you're like, ooh, that was really cool. And you also know that would have never happened if not for your relationship with whoever that was, one of these people that you just mentioned. What is an example of something like that, Nick?
Well, you know, they all in many ways did, but I think you'd have to go to GKIC, right? I got to make an impact on not only the team, right,
Sure.
and work with what a great team of people. Many of them still there to this day, right? And it's fun to see their evolution. I still get notes from salespeople that we hired, right? Some were young kids we hired right out of college that we just, kind of saw something in them, or somewhere on their second phases of their second careers or third careers, and still will get notes from them, either LinkedIn messages or Facebook messages or personal calls, which makes an impact, right?
Yeah.
Just that you brought somebody into the profession of sales, and they're still doing it, and they want to thank you for them. And that you saw something in them. And just like we talked about, maybe there was a piece of advice that we gave, or maybe there was an interview that I did with somebody that somebody learned something that helped jettison their business, right? So they being the members, that person's business hopefully is better off because we either produced a product or did an interview or created an event, or they saw a speaker at an event, or something that they then took action on and improved the value of their business, the value of their family, the value of their cash flow, right? And so I like to think of my time here, right, is not over, but there are certain things in that chunk of time from 2006 to 2012, what was it, 2012 to 2020, right? That 8 year span. I like to think that, I made some level of impact on not only team members, um, board members, right? We had a private equity firm that owned us, right? So there was investors in the business, and the most importantly, the customers or the members, and all those folks.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're right. There's a lot of people involved, like you just said, and the cool thing about that, and then there's a lot more people beyond that, families of those people, spouses, children. There's clients of businesses that are being served, and their spouses and their families, and their, I mean, when we start thinking about the ripple effect of this, it gets pretty doggone huge, you know. And
Oh yeah.
I just want to kind of draw that out because the work that you've done in that area has impacted millions of people's lives. And
You, you I firmly believe, and I think you do too, Kevin, that small businesses really are the backbone of every
yeah,
community that they serve, right? In some way, shape, or form, they are the backbone.
yeah,
And they are the driver of the local economy. Sure, there's big businesses and that type of thing, but really the small businesses are the driver of that economy, whether it's the localized restaurants that people have many phenomenal, meals at or celebrations at, or the localized bookstore or the localized service business, whatever it is. And I'm passionate about hopefully, and I've carry that through is helping them in some way, shape, or form so that their lives are better and they continue to make that impact, right? Because they're the people sitting next to you at the restaurant. They're the people sitting next to you in the pew at church, right? They're who you walk past in the library when you're walking in and out and saying hello to. And those people matter, each and every day. And their businesses, if impact not only their families, but their families of their employees. And, this spiral is, like you said, is just keeps on growing. It's
Yeah.
almost like a spider web that, is 7, 8, 9, 10 yards deep of all the different people that we impact. And, it's almost, it's a wonderful life, right? If we think about all the people that he impacted, well, we as individuals have that same impact. And,
That's right.
I try to do it for good. Certainly made some mistakes along the way. I'm only human, right? But you just try to do it for good all the time.
That's right. That's right. Yes. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation, Nick. And for anybody listening to this that's going, man, Kev, I really like Nick. I appreciate the way that he shows up. How can they, any resources, any websites that we can share with them with the show notes and all that, and how they can get more information on what you guys are doing and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a pay it forward kind of guy. So, the first thing, they can find us at salesperformanceteam.com. Once
Okay.
again, it's salesperformanceteam.com. I've created a lot of different products that we implement into our clients' business.
Okay.
Some people, could use it, a lot of the IP that we've created. So I try to put as much of it out there, in open source, right? And if they use it, just send me a note, say hey, it worked. And so they could go to pack dot salesperformanceteam.com, and they
Okay.
could get a download of what we use. Like we have got a 100-point checklist, right? So what are the top 100 things that you need to look at for your sales team? We do some call evaluation forms that they could use when they evaluate their sales team's calls. I think you get one of my ebooks that we wrote about, kind of the philosophy of managing it. So we want to give all that to people. They could find that there. They could hit me up on LinkedIn. They could hit me up on Facebook. I'm on those platforms. Instagram, I kind of use for my family, right? So that's really not business. But if
Okay.
they just want to see all the different things that my wife and I go do now that we're empty nesters, right? They could be more than happy to kind of visit me on that. So, the socials, I'm all on it. Nick at salesperformanceteam.com. Send me a line. Even if they have a sales question or they're struggling with hiring somebody, we'll take a look at their ads for them, right? Or if they have a sales process or they just can't retain salespeople or they don't know how to structure commissions,
Okay.
just send me a note, right? So say, hey, I'm part of Kevin. I heard you on Kevin. And I'll spend some time with them. We want to help people and we want to pay back to you and the work that you do, and we want to honor the work that you do.
Well, thanks so much for that, Nick. I really appreciate that. So I'll make sure that we include that with the show notes and stuff. And any last thing you feel led to share before we call it a wrap, Nick?
Yeah. So we talked a lot about, the power of relationships, and the importance of relationships. And I think when you're hiring salespeople, as a business owner, as a sales manager, you should talk to them about relationships and how do they view relationships, because that's how they're going to view the relationships they have with your customers. And, we talked about making an impact, but the best salespeople really are the collectors and curators of relationships with their customers over the course of time. And when I want to see if a salesperson's really going to be good at what they do, I talk to them about that and see how they reference their sales, their customers and their clients, and what is their viewpoint of that. And I had somebody that we both know was talking about somebody that you know we both know, and they said, their impact would have been far larger, though their impact is good. Their impact would have been far larger if they really spent the time to invest more in relationships with people, right? Versus being transactional. And this person had a huge impact on the world, but could have been even bigger. And that really stuck with me, right? So how do we give back? How do we pay it forward? How do we make deposits in emotional bank accounts, if you quote Covey, with folks? And I'm a firm believer of that. And there's so much that bring us together. Let's celebrate that versus the logarithms that focus on dividing us.
Amen. Amen. Well, Nick, I really appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation today. And man, I'm totally stoked to get this out there and share it with a lot of other entrepreneurs. And so, once again, thank you so much. Really appreciate you, Nick.
I appreciate you, Kevin. Thank you for all you're doing. Keep the fire going. You're on the West Coast. I'm in the Midwest, and I look forward to seeing you with that wonderful smile that lights up the room. Probably at one of the next event that we see each other at.
Absolutely.